Yarn. Yarn number 10. Oonagh and the Giant. Something had spooked the sheep. They were all huddled together under the oak tree, shivering. Oonagh gazed out at the empty fields.
Finn, come out here.
She called out to her husband.
What's that?
Oonagh pointed at the sea. On a clear day, you could see as far as the coast of Scotland. But today, a thick grey mist stretched across the ocean, completely enveloping the horizon line. The waves chopped and snapped and sprayed spit in the air. Oonagh pulled Finn closer to the cliff edge. They looked down at the surf crashing against the rocks below.
Something has them acting queer too. Have you ever seen the like of it?
Hundreds of jellyfish clung to the cliff wall. More arrived with each crash of white suddy spray. They were attempting to pull themselves up the cliff and out of the sea. Then wave after wave of cod, bass and flounder started throwing themselves at the rock face in desperation. Oonagh stepped back from the edge in horror. A shape started to slowly emerge from the distant mist. It was a man.
Ben and Donner?
The shadowy figure grew larger before their eyes. He flung clusters of large stones ahead of himself, then stamped them down underfoot, creating a pathway over the ocean as he walked forward. Each time he hammered the rocks into place, a ripple radiated out, growing larger as it sped across the surface until it broke against the opposite shore, right where Oonagh and Finn stood.
He's a lot bigger than I expected,
Finn said, with a lump in his throat.
I'm no match for him.
The giant's progress was slow, but steady. His persistent hammering echoed across the channel, like the beating of an impending war drum.
What are we to do?
I have an idea. We'll need to get back to the house.
She instructed Finn to get into the cattle trough. She then wrapped a blanket around the large lump of a man, so his face was the only part of him exposed.
Now, lie down in there and don't say a word. Whatever you hear, stay quiet.
Finn was confused, but he trusted his wife. The giant's booming footsteps shook the ground ahead of them. He'd reached the shore. Oonagh set up a stool outside the front door and sat down. She watched as the enormous man rose up from the cliff edge and walked towards her. His long shadow darkened the ground ahead of her.
Where is Fionn McCall, the largest and fiercest man in Ireland?
Ben Donner bellowed.
He's away hunting in Kerry since this morning. I'm expecting him back now soon. Half the island's heard your banging, so I'm sure he's already on his way.
If he's up and run off, I'll kill every man on this island until he shows himself.
He'll be along as soon as he smells his dinner. Do you want something while you wait? You've come a long way. You must be famished.
Well, yes, actually.
Oonagh walked over to a cart piled high with potatoes. Hundreds of them. This year's whole harvest.
Well, this much usually does himself, but he'll just have to share if we have a guest.
That whole cart is just for his dinner?
Oh yeah, that's if he's had a big lunch. He'd sooner just pick the whole thing up and swallow it whole, but I'm trying to put manners on him. Make him use cutlery.
She pointed at the large axe and shovel resting against the cart.
He'd really pick up that whole cart and swallow it?
Oh yeah, sure the wee lad has a savage appetite too, just like his daddy. Isn't that right, wee Finn?
The giant inspected the massive baby sleeping in the trough.
This is his wee lad.
He's a cute wee thing, isn't he? The spit of his daddy.
Ben Donner's eyes fixed on the mature, battle-worn, bearded face of the baby.
He's a big lad, all right.
The giant slowly extended his hand to gently pinch the baby's cheek. But before his finger even came close, the baby opened his eyes and bit down hard on the giant's finger. Blood spurted from the giant's finger, the bite cut deep to the bone.
Oh no, you've gone and upset him. He's a terrible temper. Again, just like his daddy. Sure wasn't his father in a strop one day, and didn't he kick up a strip of turf out of the ground over there and knocked it into the sea?
Oonagh pointed to the large circular lake nearby, then to a small island jutting up out of the sea in the distance.
If you squint, you can still make out the sod of turf out there.
Benadonner turned and ran back towards the coast from whence he came, sucking on his bloodied finger. He was no longer interested in the prospect of fighting Finn McCool. The giant's only concern now was making sure Finn didn't pay a visit to his side of the channel. Benadonner leaped from the cliff, landing on the rocky passage. As he ran back across the sea, he ripped up the path in his wake. Rocks flew through the air and crashed into the water. Enormous splashes reached up high into the sky like plumes of white smoke. When the water calmed, the giant had disappeared back into the mist. His mighty stone crossing lay in ruin. Benadonner never again returned to Irish shores, and the myth of the giant of giants, Finn McCool, spread throughout the world. All thanks to the quick-witted Oonagh. That's the legend of how the Giant's Causeway in County Antrim, on the island of Ireland, came to be. The sod of turf Oonagh said was kicked into the sea is still there to this day. We know it as the Isle of Man, and the divot it left in the ground is known as Lough Neagh, Ireland's largest lake. This has been a story for yarnpodcast.com, written and narrated by John Roach.